There are several ways you can go about handling form data that a person submits to you and you want to provide feedback on. I have a comment form here, and if I type in a handle and accidentally leave out the comment that I want to add and submit the form, and this goes to another web page called publish-comment.php, and I want to provide feedback that says, did you mean to leave a comment? That's a poor excuse of an error message, but also display the form with that error message on it, with the form populated with whatever they entered back in so it's not lost. One way you can go about doing it is doing something called a header redirect, and doing that requires that you use something called a session. There are other approaches that you can take to also provide feedback, which are called a HTTP post and using a client-side JavaScript technology called Ajax. I won't cover those two, being the HTTP post or Ajax. I'll just go over header redirects in this video. And what a header redirect does is tells the client's web browser to go to a different web page. This is the source code for publish-comment, which actually takes in the data that they entered in on the form, checks it, and if everything's fine, it will add the comment to the database. Otherwise, it will display an error. Now, to tell them to do the header redirect and tell them to go to a different web page, I would use the header function and supply a string, which is the header I want the web server to transmit back to the client's web browser. And I'll tell it location : and then supply the URL to tell the person's web browser where to go to. And I want to go back to the video.php page, so I'll do video.php. Save it, refresh the form, and now we're back at video.php. And if I were to type in Joe, click publish, looked like nothing has happened. It's like the form's reset. But in reality what happened is it took the data, submitted it to publish comment, did the header redirect back to here. And I also have a add-on installed called HTTP headers. Well, it's actually live HTTP headers. And in here, if I tell it I'm Joe and click on publish, and the headers that are sent, one of them is an HTTP 302. And that stands for a temporary redirect. And you actually see a location of video.php, which is this header that I'm sending out here. Technically, the headers should be done before I print out any output. For example, I print out, did you mean to leave a comment? And that should be done after I output any headers. But the web browser is smart enough to figure out what I'm trying to do. But to actually do this correctly, I would need to start what's called an output buffer, which is ob_start. And what this does is anything that I try to print out to the screen, it won't actually print. It would actually print it out to this temporary location called a buffer that you cannot see. And if I wanted to print it out after I do the headers, I would do an ob_end_flush. And that would flush out or print out any of the information at this point instead of before. So anything that's outputted between ob_start and ob_end_flush to the screen like it's normally done, it would be temporarily withheld. But since I'm doing a header redirect, and they're not going to see anything anyway. I'll just do an ob_end_clean, which would just delete what's ever in the output buffer and not print it out at all. And technically people say if you do a header redirect, you should do an exit, which ends the program, but I'm not including publish comment.php anywhere, so I'll leave that out. Now it's the question of how do you get the error message to appear on the web page. To do that, you'll need to start up a session. And a session allows me to track a user as they browse from web page to web page on a web site that I'm running. And it does that by putting a cookie out on the person's web browser. So I'll do a session_start, which will start a session. And if a session already exists for that person, it will resume it. So I'll do that on video.php, and I'll also do it on publish comment.php. And I'll place the ob_start before session_start. That's what the PHP documentation recommends. So now, since the session is active and I have access to the session, and there's no set way to go about doing it, so the way I'm showing you, you could do it differently in terms of how you structure the information. But to save the form data is I'll put the form data into the session variable, and the session variable can be accessed by doing, after you do a session_start, you can access the session variable by doing a $_session in uppercase. And that's a super global variable that stores the session information for a particular visitor on the website that's going from web page to web page. And it's usually treated as an associative array that maps string keys to pieces of data. So I can put my form data in, and I'll assign it to another super global variable called $_post. $_post is the information that you submitted in this form. And the form method is post, and that post means that it'll appear in this $_post super global variable. Now, since you could have potentially be using different forms on this website, and they could have different web browsers open. Well, actually not different. They can have new web browsers open pointed at the same website in different web browser windows of the same web browser could cause problems. So I want to key this form by the form name, which I have not set up. So I'll just set a name of add_comment. Setting up a form name isn't required, but I'll just do it for consistency. So that's my add comment form. That's the form data of the form, and I'll set it to the raw data that they posted. And by raw, I mean it's not filtered like I'm doing down here with the information that they put into the form. And to include the feedback under that, using the session variable instead of doing the echo statements, I'll assign session of add comment of message, and I'll assign